Welcome to Cut Daisies and Unicorns, and we're back. We're back in the studio, and that's right. We have all the fanfare. We have the horns going down, everything.
Yeah, I'd try a little ska, but I'm short on my punk roots.
Oh, you were gonna do some scat too, like beep bop boop bop boop.
I was not. Although, that might be the language we're looking for the aliens to come and talk with us. Be. You know?
It could also be blue, orange, yellow, I don't know, green.
All of this stuff.
All
of this stuff.
All of it.
Well, welcome everyone to Season 6.
Season 6.
Episode 1.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sitting here on a Friday. Very interestingly enough, want to make sure that our watchers and listeners know that we are in summer schedule. So that means that we will be doing time jumps, the loop-de-de-loops, based on how it all works out.
It's true. Yeah, and sometimes it'll work out, sometimes it won't. So. Yeah.
Sometimes our minds will work, and sometimes our minds won't work.
Yeah, it'll be slow. We're gonna try the mental gymnastics today and see what comes of it.
Well, you know what? We've got a special weekend coming up.
We do.
Yeah, Father's Day.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about it just this morning.
Yeah.
It'll be Micah's first Father's Day celebration. We got to celebrate Bree for Mother's Day with baby Wesley.
Yeah.
And so excited about that, for him to be able to go through that part. How do you feel about Father's Day? I think we've talked about
it. We brought this up. I think it was last year.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, it's always a little bit of a conflict for me, because it's always like like, what could I have done better? And I don't know. It's the unfortunate part of most of of life. That's the way that I always look back in perspective on, days like that, is like, I probably wasn't the best this or that or whatever. And so it's like, it's a day, and we'll still hang out with a portion of my children.
Yeah.
And so it'll be okay.
So
Tyson will be working on Sunday. So,
slinging chicken again.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
We watched Kevin Hart in Fatherhood.
Oh.
A 2021 movie last evening.
Yeah. I heard that was a bit of a tearjerker.
You know what? I cried.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, the end of my day, the end of the movie, I didn't realize how much it would stir up in me. Looking at that, I've actually posed to my children recently this question, and that is because I really do consider I probably. Whether I should think it this way or not, I have moved into like season 3 of my life. And so, I get a lot of alone time to be in my head. And so, just because of responsibilities, shifting and changing, it's just a different season for me. And then I have to be proactive about how I'm going to handle my head, and so like you can get into your head and be looking backwards historically. And I wonder if regret is found in the rear view mirror. So if you're looking back, there's times of reminiscence that are celebratory, times that are sad, times, but is vision or the dreaming, is that looking out through the windshield? Now, this is just a word picture for me to use about, we're used to vehicles having rear view mirrors and windshields. But then the next step is not to get caught in a loop of regret or not to get caught in a consistent loop of reminiscence that the only thing that your mind is taken up with is thinking about the past. But then what does the future have to hold? And how envisioning, or we can use the word dreaming, and then the next day, as I was thinking about that, I came down with a new axiom for me. If I'm going to dream, I don't get to do what I want to do. For me to realize dreams, I need to do the things that I need to do. So here's the thing.
Yeah.
In a dream of, this is the dream. If I could have life this way, okay? Or if I could only do this, that would be a dream. For instance, I've never dreamt of being on an NBA team. 5'9", stubby boy. Ain't got no vertical jump. That's never been a dream of mine. But so if you're listening, whatever, like, what is there something that you would have an that would be euphoric, or that would be a great thing to be able to do?
Right.
That you can set out and take steps to move to accomplish. All right. So dreaming.
Right.
Well, I think sometimes in our Western cultured mind, what we end up doing is we say, well, we do it into this art of elimination of the things we don't want to do in our current life.
Yeah.
Well, that's a pain in the butt. Oh, that's horrible. This isn't fun. Blah, 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 right? But the thing is making the dream work is more than teamwork. It's doing the things, not that you want to do, it's doing the things that you need to do. And so, and just like for instance, like, think about it. How many times have we talked about, people, they're okay.
Right.
But if we didn't have to be in a people business, wouldn't that be okay?
Yeah.
All right. Now
Sometimes.
Think about how often in the past 5 seasons, like, we've stumbled on that, right? Now, what did I even start the premise with? In my new season, I'm not around a lot of people.
Right.
So then what am I left with? Oh, there's a bigger culprit here in this whole equation. I'm left with myself in my head. That's not a good playground to be on.
Right.
So that's so, like, I want to make a name for myself as a potter, and I want to have success as an artist, and like, all of these things that, I would say a system sells us on what the dream is. And bottom line is, I'm cutting up 25-pound rectangles of clay, and I've got to roll it out and put it on forms. I got to make a mess, and I got to clean it up. So, like, not this week, but last week, I literally spent 16 hours cleaning my studio. Like, I clocked it.
Right.
And that's where I came up with...
you weren't there for a little bit.
Well, yeah, I'd been down for about 3 weeks, as far as, like, there were just travel and things going on, and by the time you catch up at home and all of this stuff and blah-bitty, blah-bitty, blah, blah, blah. But it was literally, I went to try to do a project, and there was no open space on any surface for me to be able to start another project. So it's about time I got to clean up all my projects.
Right.
And get rolling and going. And I have, it's not a value in my life, but I have boiled down, and this is a repeat, hashtag gonna hear it again. The reality is my life is boiled down to now, I make messes and I clean messes up. when people ask me what I'm doing with my life, and I tell them, oh, I'm potter, sculptor, artist.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, wow, that's so cool. Is it?
Maybe you should start with saying, what do you do? Like, what are you doing? Like, I make messes.
And I clean them up.
And then I clean them up.
And we were talking about it as our family was traveling for a celebration of life a couple weekends ago. Talking about it, that the one thing that I really enjoy doing right now is cooking.
Yeah.
It's euphoric. I absolutely just enjoy cooking. What is cooking? Cooking is doing the prep work to be able to make a mess that you have to clean up. Now I've moved into a new OCD function.
Just when you're cooking?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Well, because it has to do with the kitchen sink. Yeah. So then, if I'm making dinner, I'm at a place where, usually while I'm getting things rolling and going, I'll make sure that the dishwasher's empty. Because if it's not empty and then I get done cooking, I either have to hand wash all the dishes. So which is the worst task?
Right.
Now, I am filing this under cleaning. Then I have to move the clean dish, which for everybody who doesn't have a dishwasher,
me.
I get it. I get it. We're, first world problem Steve-O right here. But, so while I'm doing that, I make sure I got a clean dishwasher. And then with that, but I like a clean sink when I'm done.
Me too.
So is this OCD or is this just a normal evolution?
Yeah, it's hard to tell because I think, so for me, when I don't always do it on the so I don't cook and then make sure I'm clean before I eat. Sometimes it's later. Sometimes it's the next morning, especially if it's dinner.
See, that's what I'm anti.
Right.
I'm anti having to get to a dirty sink in the morning.
Yeah.
Because then if I leave the dirty sink all day, then I've got a dishwasher and a dirty sink to get ready so that I can be able... See, this is the same problem that happened at the studio, Phil. If every square inch of workable space is full, eventually there's not going to be any space. So you got to have something clean. So then, I get into cleaning mode.
Right.
And to my fault, before I get into eating mode.
So clean before eat.
Well, that's where I like it to be, because where the dish is going to go after you get done eating, are they going to go onto a pile?
Or is it going to be
clean? Is it just a really quick rinse, back in, boom, hit the thing? Now, when I get home tonight, there's a clean dishwasher to clean out again. And I'm cool with a minimalistic approach to... I don't have a lot of pans, so if the pan's dirty, guess who doesn't get to fix dinner until the pan's clean? So, but this is an evolution within me. There's been a time in my life that I could walk away from a dirty sink and not feel bad about it for lots of time.
Yeah, I don't, I guess, for me, it's always hey, I would prefer it to be cleaned that night.
Yeah.
But but I'm also at that point, after I eat dinner, if I don't have any meetings or anything else
what
going
happens?
on, then I'm going to sit.
Your belly's full.
Right.
Your blood's going to your belly to digest the food.
Right.
You have low energy. You go ahead and you watch some TV, and then pretty soon it's time to go to sleep, and then what didn't get done?
Right.
The dishes.
Yeah, and that's where I'm always hey, so if somebody else really wants to be able to, do those dishes at night, fantastic, go ahead and get it done. I'll be happy. But if most of the time, I'll still, when I get up in the morning, go to the gym, come home, that's when I'll do dishes right at that point, because sometimes, especially in the summertime, Like it's humid
Hot.
with so you're like, hey, I'm already sweating from the gym. So like, let's just carry this over, get all the dishes done. And that's when I clean the stove, I clean the countertops, and
Yep.
I make sure that all of that's cleaned up.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to start this process over again tonight.
Right. Exactly. Which now this could be a game changer for some of our listeners. Mm-hmm. Which is why I've become an advocate for prepping meals.
Yeah.
So, like, if I've got the charcoal grill going, I'm not just doing one meal.
You're going to layer it.
I've got stages I try to hit at least 3. And so in my head, I could have a stage of pork that I'm doing. I could have a stage of chicken that I'm doing. I could have a stage of steaks, or I mean, do it a different way. Burgers, so turkey, brats, and chicken. Like I like to stagger it like. So then what happened? And actually, last night was beautiful because I had fixed burgers the night before. It was so freaking hot that I did it inside on the stove, and then and I'm like, I bought 2 pounds of ground turkey, and I knew that I was going to use half of it for burgers and the other half for tacos, and so then it was there, easy pull out, and all that stuff. But food prep, yeah, and I mean, you can whip up a salad in no time. You can, get your veggies taken care of. I'm still a fan. I'll go on the record. People could argue this point on taste and all that stuff, but I'm still a fan based on spoilage of the frozen vegetable.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I like using frozen vegetables as well, just because I know if I have other vegetables in the fridge and it's not a part of like peppers, usually that's the thing. I mean, like if I get a 6-pack of peppers, I'm not going to be using all those peppers in one go.
Right.
So currently now I think I have 2 peppers sitting in there that, I just use them Sunday.
Yeah.
So now I've got to figure out how to be able to incorporate peppers into another meal.
Right.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I have found though, and Amy does enjoy vegetables in her lunch and stuff, like cut up vegetables. Mm-hmm. And so I prep the vegetables on shopping day.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found that really makes vegetables last longer is by throwing a paper towel.
Like a damp or?
The vegetables, once you rinse them off, will make the towel damp.
Oh, so you just put it in dry then.
And so then it absorbs the water, the excess water, but it maintains a moisture level that in the Ziploc bag, the vegetables last longer. Like
Smart.
some of that can get 2 weeks out of.
Mm-hmm.
And so that when I tell people it takes me 3 hours to shop and 2 hours to put stuff away, that's why. So
that's why it takes time.
That's why it takes time, is because I'm parsing off meat that I am going to cook in the next 3 days. I'm putting the rest of it in the freezer. I've got, I haven't gone to having a deep freeze actually on rotation. I don't think we would use the food that is deep in the deep freeze. We wouldn't go through it fast enough.
Yeah. Sometimes we bury some stuff in the deep freeze.
I know.
Like, look at this. I think we've got a pork loin in here.
But, it's to me, it's just fascinating where, like, everybody talks about, you know how, like, didn't Facebook used to have a status, and it could be, like, it's complicated? Mm-hmm. Like relationship status. It's complicated. I'm pretty sure I was that. And so, like, with, people look at life and can say, well, life, it's complicated. Like, I'm sure there's people who listen to this podcast and be like, no, man, you don't get what I'm going through. It is complicated.
Right. Sure.
Okay. But I bet if you just take 3 to 5 minutes and ask yourself this question, Is what you're stumbling over really the part of you making a mess and needing to clean it up? I swear, that is my life, man. I make messes and I clean it up. Oh man. And for the record, I want to just let you know, I like got the forms and mold. It took a couple weeks to get the clay plaster molds made, to let them dry out and stuff like that. But I mean, I'm going to put out like 9 really nice bowls this week and getting my system down, paying attention to weights and all that stuff. I mean, like, it's just going and growing and, and all that stuff. But man, and I enjoy the work.
Which is necessary, I think.
Enjoy the creation.
Right.
Yeah. I did an upgrade to the 1970s kiln, put a thermocouple in there. It's kind of cool because when I leave the lid open, I can actually tell what the temperature is in the studio. And so that's cool. But by doing that, I think I really found out what some of my bumpy steps were in my firing and why I've been having problems with the glazing. And so when people are like, yeah, we hear you're a potter, but I mean, where's the pottery? I'm like, I'm working this shit out. Everybody calm down. Yeah, come on. I mean, I got like tons of B grade stuff, but then there's others. I'm like, we're working towards a level. And so those things are coming. But, I do. I make messes. And
you clean them up.
And I clean it up. And everybody's like, oh, man, it's so cool. You get to do what you do. I'm like, it is. It's a really cool season. But every season has its two-edged sword, and just don't fall on it today. Right. So anyway, Father's Day.
So challenges. That's the. So everybody's going to have some challenges.
Well,
in whatever season they're in.
Yeah. And for the record, I absolutely have loved being a dad. Currently, I'm a dad, but I'm a dad of 4 adult human beings that are living a season of life that I resembled as a young adult. And that is, they are busy with life.
Right.
And it's great. It's great to see all 4 of them excel and doing life together, and to hear them giggle and laugh and, have a good time with what's going on. And so, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is, fatherhood in this season is much different than, what it has been. I mean, so my kids are also all, grown, and I guess Tyson will be 20 here in July. So yeah, it's crazy. But so that's my youngest. So I mean, it's kind of like, all right, so now in this is more of a support role, like, hey, do you need some, like, let's figure that out as we go along now. I mean, it's completely different. Before it was like you had discipline, you had guidance, a lot more of like that approach, and now it's kind of like, all right, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
And what do you need from me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a whole different ground.
How old are you?
40. Well, next week I'll be 44.
See, how many of y'all? What are we, like 11 years different? I'm 55. You'll be 44. That's 11 years. I never think of you as being 11 years younger than me.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, I just mentioned it to someone yesterday, and they're like, 40? You're like, 40? No way. Like, yeah, like, I mean, I'm way more wise than I look. I don't know. That's probably not it either.
Yeah. What is it? Man, I was somewhere, and somebody asked about if I had children, and I said, yeah. And they're like, oh, really? What age? Oh, now I remember. It was a sales clerk last weekend. And I'm like, well, my daughter just turned 29, and my son is, in July will be 27. And She's like, "Oh, you had kids when you were young." I'm like, "Yeah, I was just a baby."
Right. Which we did too. I mean, I think, it was 20. Yeah, so Caitlin just turned 22.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's like half my life. So, 44, 22.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we also started young, and I mean, which is also like when you look at some of these parents who waited, and they've got like, I mean, and they're my age with some younger kids, and I'm always like, yeah, like there's some pros and cons to that. Like, I'm actually kind of happy that, like, Heather and I are now moving into a season where we have more freedom as individuals and as, as a couple. That we didn't have when you were younger, where there was, like they had freedom when they were younger versus later. So I'm like, I don't know. So I could see some pros and cons to that. Like, now we're still pretty young, and we've got more freedom, and, and it's, I don't know. So to me, there's I kind of like that movement towards freedom now, and versus there I didn't have freedom then.
Being available as a trusted advisor.
Right.
And in Sweden, when I visited Sweden, one of the things that's really interesting about Sweden is that they have all education is paid for by the state.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people in Sweden have multiple degrees. And so, So
they're an educated group.
They are a very educated group. A lot of people have 2 degrees, and many of them move into the higher degrees because...
And that's all paid for too?
If
like
the state's paying for it.
Wow.
Yeah. What a lot of people don't know, I think, which I've mentioned before, and this will lead into another topic, is that a lot of people don't know that Sweden's governmental income comes from arms manufacturing.
Like Tony Stark.
And so it's due to that the government has passed that on. Instead of fighting the stigma of the military, they use the military and the income that comes from that to be able to give to the citizens through education. And I mean, multiple language. I really, really enjoyed learning about Swedish people. But a lot of people aren't starting to have their families until the age of between 30 and 40.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's biological clocks that tick, and so there's questions about that. But still, it's an interesting part when you bring up, hey, there's pros and cons on both sides. And then, there's Hollywood stars that are in their 80s who have 2-year-olds.
That's true.
Now,
that to me,
their wives are under 30, but
it just would not be pleasant.
I don't think they deal with it much.
Yeah. I mean, I think that being 22, 23 and having a child, and my brain was still developing.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously at that point, I'm not going to be able to, do my best, judgment calls at that point in time either. So now if I was 30 or 40, I'm going to be a different parent.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I go back to some of those where we, whether it's regret or, just thinking back I could have done this differently. But, it is what it was.
Yeah. And I think that moves into just recognizing, thought process cycles. And that's where I was starting with today, in that, you have to catch yourself. This moves into a part of self-awareness. It's your emotional IQ of what's going on, and that's where I try to be a good steward of the space between my ears, to say, oh, hey, you know what, dude, you're just you're hanging out in the past, and you're thinking for whatever reason, and maybe it's because of humanity and the way we're wired and stuff like that. You're letting your mind go to you're missing out on the things that went well, and a training of my mind. And it's not to be in a point of avoidance, or to have a like a blackout of realities, but then to ask the question of, hey, where are you spending your mental space, in regards to that,
Right.
And I think that, again, that's why the season matters. I think that there's a lot of parts in season 1 of information and education, where you're living out life. In season 2, then as being a provider protector, that you're busy with the provision and the protection. Then, if you move into season 3, then, the season of reminiscence can take you to the place of, well, I didn't do that. If I coulda, woulda, shoulda, you got to move into. So, what does living out dreams in a dream life, look like and stuff? But yeah. So, that gets us rolling and going. Hey, welcome to Chicago, everybody. This is the Golden Shoreline Art Festival is actually this weekend. And so lots of live music going on, man, in and out of this city, all over the place. So that's an opportunity. But yeah, we just came off of, temperature heat indexes of 104 to 115 degrees, and hot and sweaty, and wondering if the air conditioner was ever going to shut off. And
right, it wasn't.
yeah. And, but now we're getting a little reprieve, and so hopefully that'll be enjoyable.
Yeah, this weekend actually is below normal, what it normally, So we were up above normal, and now we get a Saturday, Sunday, we get a little bit of a reprieve, and
them swings.
And then back to next week, where I think there's like 3 days of 95, 97, like at 99. Those days. Yeah. Not things that I look forward to.
Yeah. Well, another thing happening this weekend.
Yeah.
Juneteenth. You want to give everybody a recap real quick?
Yeah, so Juneteenth of just, because I think it'll be more, it will be more prevalent this year, because last year they made it a federal holiday. So for those who are not aware of what Juneteenth is, so after the slaves were given freedom, right, it was illegal to, have slaves. That nobody told the slaves in Texas about it for 2 years after the declaration was made. Now you'd say, during that time there was no mass communication. Well, there was mass communication, but it was a little bit more guarded. And so it was 2 years later that all of a sudden, you guys are free.
Wow.
You should probably, you don't have to be here. Now, you could now get a job with these people, but they are not allowed to own slaves. So Juneteenth was the Texas Declaration of the Freedom of the Slaves. And so Juneteenth wasn't always celebrated in mass, culture-wise. It was kind of like a, black, African-American, there were pockets of people who would celebrate Juneteenth. And then it, with a lot of the, kind of the racial strife and things that were happening around the country, that some of these things were made a little bit more well known.
Well, and for people who are following the Yellowstone episodes and getting into 1883, just to give a for instance, that this actually happened in 1865.
Yeah.
So if you want to set into just a fictional historic time frame and think about that there were people who are navigating across the western United States to settle.
Right.
You're talking about in 1865, then Texas was the last original, or I'm sorry, let me say this correctly. The last of, I'm reading, the last state of the Confederacy with institutional slavery. Now, and to your point, 2 years, January 1, Abraham Lincoln, when his Emancipation Proclamation issued that freedom. And so, yeah, with that, now you're looking at, and why we're bringing this up is because we're in that historical moment. Will this be considered the second year of celebration since, as a federal holiday, since Joe Biden signed that in?
Yeah, I was trying. I think it was just last year that it was signed in, but
on June 17th, 2021.
Yeah,
when President Joe Biden.
So I guess technically this year. I mean, even I guess so. Last year was the first, but
the inaugural.
Right, but I think that there wasn't enough, opportunity to be able to make a bigger deal. So now this year, they're trying to be. I mean, so there's like celebrations on television. There's things that are happening, that are kind of highlighting a little bit more.
Yeah,
and so. Yeah, so I think that with all of that's going on, there's a little bit more of the, like, let's shine a light on this a little bit more so that people know, So it's a celebration of Black culture. It's a celebration of some of the freedom, so we can look at that and say, oh, but that's not my culture. Well, no, it is our culture. I mean, Black culture is American culture too.
Yeah.
And so we shouldn't be afraid of being able to look at and finding these celebrations in place. So.
Well, and even when white people ask the question of, well, what can I do, or how can I be a part of what's going on, with all of, making room and allowing for that. One of the things that we can do, folks, is to make room for, if July 4th is a part of an American tradition that you get really excited about to celebrate. I mean, the three majors that move us through the season of summer, we have Memorial Day weekend. Mm-hmm. Then there's July 4th, and then we have Labor Day weekend, and it takes us through this season of, the summertime, 16 weeks. When you wonder why you wait so long for summer to come back, it's because there's a really big part of the year that's not summer.
Right.
But I thought it was interesting in the read on Wikipedia that, in celebration, I mean, it's like all over the place. Celebrations include picnics, rodeos, street fairs, cookouts, family reunions, park parties, historical reenactment, blues festivals, and Miss Juneteenth contests. But this is interesting. Red food and drinks are traditional during celebrations, including red velvet cake and strawberry soda. I mean, we're here to help inform.
Right.
So make a red velvet cake with your favorite frosting and get some strawberry soda.
Yeah. Does it say, I mean, what the origin? I mean, like sometimes there's an origin, sometimes it's not, but because it seems weird, red velvet, and I mean, like strawberry soda.
So there's an article here from 2017, Hot Links and Red Drinks, the Rich Food Tradition of Juneteenth. I'd have to run in and take a look at the whole of that. But what's also interesting, it's the Muskogos are an Afro-descendant group in Coahuila, Mexico, centered in the town. My Spanish pronunciations are horrible, but the group are descendants of black Seminoles escaping the threat of slavery in the United States.
Yeah.
And so the black Seminoles are Indian Negroes associated with the Seminole people in Florida and Oklahoma. They are mostly blood descendants of the Seminole people, free blacks and escaped slaves who allied with Seminole groups in Spanish Florida. They've resided in, just right up there, yeah. Coahuila, Mexico. They've celebrated Juneteenth as well. 1852, but they resided there in Mexico since 1852. They also celebrate Juneteenth. So you're looking at a First Nations group that basically fled to Mexico so that they wouldn't be enslaved in Texas. Mm-hmm. And again, I take everyone back to 1883 who's seen the series of how hard life was even in that time, in regards to changes and how things have changed. Now, when we look at 2023 is upon us. Mm-hmm. We still see that. I mean, it was 1865, mm-hmm. but you're talking about there wasn't like emancipation and like everything that was happening with Martin Luther King and the South segregated. I mean, we're talking about in the 1960s. Mm-hmm. It's 100 years later.
Right.
Those fights went on.
Yeah. So even after the Emancipation Proclamation, where it was illegal to, right? You can't hold those, people anymore. There was still a struggle. I mean, I think that's where when we talk about a lot of the, systemic issues that have, people are like, oh, we haven't had slaves and blah, 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 like, okay. So, what about the switch over from, like Jim Crow laws?
Right.
Because it was like, we need to do something in order to control, and then the prison complex, became a system in which we would enslave people again.
Yeah.
And we started off with, kind of petty crimes and,
Yep.
even like marijuana possession. And it was like, and we're going to throw people in prison, and there we can get cheap labor from these people.
Yeah.
And there is cheap labor still within the prison system.
Yep.
So we're looking at a system by which we were always trying to keep people down.
Yeah.
And we can look at, some people are always saying, well, yeah, but that wasn't, that wasn't black people. Like if we're looking at a percentage, we are, had imprisoned, black people at a higher rate than anybody else.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can try to justify it in your head. We can say there's more white people in prison than black, right? But not according to population statistics. So when you're looking, so to me, there was an issue that extended out of this, that we also had to be able, we have to look at currently. Even that's why when we're talking about saying, and there's this whole thing with like CRT and, critical race theory, that people think that studying this history is critical race theory, and it's not. Critical race theory is like higher education law, and we're talking about just learning a history of what happened. So Juneteenth, why wasn't it highlighted in most places throughout history? Like that, it's been relatively new for a majority of our culture and society that this even was, that this even happened 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. There were people who still believed that they could legally be enslaved.
Yeah.
I mean, and why didn't we highlight this before? And it's not us trying to be able to learn about our history so that people can be, so that the white, person can be, pushed off into a, like you don't have to, feel like everybody, all white people are terrible. But learning our history, I mean, we've said this on here before. Learning our history is good.
Well,
even the parts that weren't so good.
in seeking to understand, I mean, like what has moved. I make the appeal to people who are offended. Well, most people who are offended by this have already shut it off.
Yeah.
But my appeal still, I'll put it out there for somebody who's stumbled on it and sticks through and wonders where these two white guys are going. But my appeal is that, it really, what does it hurt to seek to understand? Why have we brought ourselves into a place where we in humanity feel like that everyone else needs to get on our page to and be in agreement with what we think?
Right.
Individually. And so, I mean, we're talking about that from the proclamation of freedom to the time that there is a national holiday, 156 years. 156 years pass.
Right.
And there's every special day on the calendar. You can have Cupcake Day. You can have, hey, take your dog to work day. Hey, you can have Secretary's Day. You can have Administrative Assistants Day. All of this stuff going on, and which I think me saying Secretary's Day is actually politically incorrect.
Right.
I think it's,
I think you said it right. You said
I corrected myself mid-sentence,
Okay.
but I wanted to let people know, warning, red flag. Again, even in conversation with black people, I mean, like, there is a distinct difference when you're making politically incorrect conversation. Most black people will say, hey, I understand that really what I hear in your words is you're on a road of discovery.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not offended by that. But I think that there is a defensive offense that occurs when there are people who just take these just racial stigmas and try to plaster that with an underlying tone of hate.
Yeah.
Or, not being willing to be open to hearing what's in someone else's shoes. Actually, it's really funny because I was watching Star Trek, whatever the new run is, and they work through basically bringing a new nation into Starfleet,
Yeah.
And the captain was like, I think they just really wanted someone to understand where they were coming from. And it was in that declaration that then this other nation joined the alliance and flew the flag, of Starfleet. To be able to get in and say, no, I wasn't a person who perpetrated this. I wasn't a person who believes this is right or correct. But in understanding, it helps me. And this is where Amy and I, as we've had conversation, and this goes back to the death of Mr. Floyd, in those conversations, there were things of walls of discrimination that had been built up, but through the conversation. And now she finds herself in work conversations with people that, again, she's well versed in this conversation, and she's discovering more and more. And that's not coming from conversation with white people.
Right.
It's coming from conversation with people of color. And how people of color in her life appreciate the approach of seeking to understand.
Yeah.
And so I just want to give people a tool. We've had several documentaries on Netflix and things like that. Phil, what is that one that you really appreciated that goes down Jim Crow, the prisons, and stuff like that on Netflix?
The 13th.
The 13th. And it's a direct reference to the 13th Amendment. So, hey, if you want some research, you want to do some reading on that, be able to, take a step. Actually, Tabor has proactively been pursuing over the last 6 years, and very, very actively in the last couple of years, recognizing that Albany Park is not predominantly white. So, been pursuing how do we as a church staff not only the pastoral staff, but also in the leadership. And for instance, that would not only be about people of color, it would also be about gender. That church leadership does not have to be just white males.
Right.
And so, this floats across the board. There are some churches that if you said women preacher, a woman pastor, I mean, just flat out freak out.
Right.
And then, but then I can really appreciate how Ron Burcham at Glory Day fought to have women on. Was it the executive committee? Not the executive committee. What was that board?
I think it was just the church board. Yeah.
Yeah. And then even moved in to have a woman be the president of that said board. There's where the motion of saying no, it's not about a mind. On NPR, you could go to the NPR site and you could be able to put in, but several articles over the last few days on how that in the medical circles, there's not a difference between the humanity of a black person and a white person, but there are prejudices about heart condition, pain tolerance, and things like that are still in. And even when tests are given, that if the person's black, it's like you have these ranges that are healthy versus a white person, you have these ranges. And people are like, really? That happens? Well, it happens if you're a person of color. You don't know it happens if you're white. So there's that. So there's a series on HBO called We Own This City, and it's based on, and if you're a book reader, journalist Justin Fenton, who was with the Baltimore Chronicle, the Baltimore Sun, the Baltimore Sun reporter, Justin Fenton. We Own This City. If you'd rather read the book, read the book. But anyway, We Own This City basically goes in a 6-episode, short, and it moves through the corruption within the police force. Now, what I will say that caught my attention to this wasn't about the portrayal of the gun trace task force being corrupt. I'm like, oh man, this is so good because of this.
Yeah.
What I really like about this series is it seems to be very balanced. And it seems to explain historically what we're facing, not just as a generation,
Yeah.
but we're facing in multiple locations all across the United States. And so there's a person there who's there with the Department of Justice, and it's for police reform and wanting to be able to get this all put into place. And she's just gathering information. But then there's the mayor who really wants to run for governor. Okay? And so the mayor tells the police chief, who's basically appointed by the mayor,
Yeah.
following that track, says, hey, I've told this city that I'm going to bring crime down. So then what happens? The police chief goes to the force and says to the force, clear the streets. With or without cause, clear the streets. Get the street corners empty, because when the street corners are empty, people aren't shooting each other. Now
There's a perception of no crime then, or a perception of peace.
well, the perception shows up in bodies. Because if they're on the corners, there's people are dying because of murder. So if we can get the murder numbers down lower, then she's able to report back, and then she can give her bid for governor. Okay? So that goes on. What do? The beat cops go out. They drive around the neighborhood. They tell everybody, we're clearing the streets in 45 minutes. Get inside your homes. Get off the streets. We're bringing paddy wagons. To the point of where the Attorney General, is that right? The Attorney General, who's the person? District
Attorney?
The District Attorney has a desk at the police station. So when people are walking in the door, that if they'll sign a waiver saying that they were not arrested without cause, they can go free. They're not arrested without cause and won't sue the city.
Right.
They can go free.
Wow.
But if the people...
But they still have a charge on their record.
No, it's dismissed right there
so
before they even get in the door.
Okay. Wow.
Yep, before they even get into the door. For the people who, for the sake of quote-unquote justice or integrity, be like, no, this is a false arrest. I wasn't doing anything. They go in. Well, then it loads up the docket with, here's a suit against the Baltimore police. And now, in this, while this is all going on, I mean, like, this is so common of what's going on. But, I mean, there's a task force that, as they're going through here, and then Department of Justice gets involved, and the FBI gets involved. And so you see this whole thing unfold. But you know what you see? You see generationally why there's a problem on all sides.
Right.
So to say the words police reform, take like political sides get reared up on those words, for and against.
Right.
And then you move into, oh my gosh. So there's all kinds of things going on in this series that is literally showing all of the sides of what's taking place. And if I mean, yeah, they're dirty cops. In one FBI interview, the cop is like, yeah, I put my share back. It was like $10K. They're like, you put your share back because you felt bad for taking money, or you put your share back because you felt bad for the amount? He goes, oh, yeah. He goes, come on, dude. We shake down the drug dealers all the time, and we're taking cash out of their pockets. That's the tax. He goes, I don't feel bad about taking the money. It was like, how can you not feel bad about taking the money? He goes, I'm out on the street, and one of these thugs could shoot me in the head, and where's my family going to be, with that?
Yeah.
It's like, so there's this justification of they're doing bad things, we're keeping them under control, and all of this stuff. And in a mind of justice of, well, that's wrong. But he's like, yeah, I 10K, that's too much. And so then later there's a drug bust. They stumble on $200,000 and they leave $100,000 and then they split, 20K between 5 different cops. And he's like, yeah, and when I got home, I just took that 20K and floated it down the river. I didn't keep it. Well, why didn't you keep it? He goes, because I'm not a dirty cop.
Yeah. So there is a justification that's happening there then.
Then there's a young guy that gets killed during an arrest because he can't breathe. Mm-hmm. And then you zoom in on this task force and they're like, we can't believe that the district attorney is filing second-degree murder charges because this cop was doing his job. I mean, and these guys are... So then what happens is, because of this thing that caused riots in Baltimore, then all of a sudden the cops are like, we can't even do our job, so we're not going to do our job. Then what happens to crime? The bad guys are like running rampant and free. Crime's on the rise. The mayor that wants to be the governor doesn't. She just pulls out and is like, I'm not even going to run. And all of this stuff is going on. And they're trying to get down to the bottom line of who's the dirty cops and how do we clean this up and and all this. But generationally, I mean, this is moved into power and control and for safety, and it's the justification for the safety of others that we're not going to be nice to bad these people, these bad people, the drug dealers, and all this stuff, and so. I didn't say spoiler alert, but I just ruined this off. I think it's worth taking in and seeing the whole and seeing the struggle with the Department of Justice in reform, what forces and all these things. And so to me personally, this is not an offensive series. I think this journalist does a very good job capturing the whole of what's going on. And I was telling Amy, I was like, yeah, I mean, like City of Chicago, the cops, they got their own neighborhoods, so I'm going to let you talk to that.
Yeah. Cause I think that's where, and I do like that there's a balance there, because what you're looking at here, I mean, so like I was, studied criminal justice, was planning to become a police officer at some point in time. Did not go that direction still. There's a whole other story. But I did study the criminal justice system at a glimpse, for many number of years. So I do understand there's a portion of that. Still have people who are friends who are either currently police officers or have retired from, being a police officer. Now, there's a whole dimension on that side that's saying we have to be able to take care of our lives as well.
Yep.
That's where you get the whole Blue Lives Matter, even though their life is not blue. That is their profession. But we need to say, yes, we don't want them killed in mass either. But you're looking at, so there's some justification, like these people are doing bad, and so we're going to continue to attack it. But for years, right, there was a system in place when we had black sites in Chicago. And those were always the point A to point B. You'd think arrest to the police station. No, black site was somewhere in the middle.
Oh, where they took people.
They took people to try to get more information out of them, but they had to do it in a way in which had to be a little bit more secretive.
Yeah.
Because they were forcing things.
Yeah.
And I'll let you just take that where you're going to take that. Like they were forcing confessions, forcing this, beating people up, and then you're wondering why there are generations of people who do not see the police as for them. And you're like, why is that somehow like a new thought to us? Like if generation after generation, like these people are looking like they are not for you. They are not going to be on your side. They are going to work against you. And if those things are the things that are taught to you, why would you ever see the police forces being for you?
There's a list in this series of police officers who perjured themselves on the witness stand against people that they had arrested.
Oh, yeah.
And those same police officers still in the street, not thrown into jail,
Right.
might get a week suspension or something like that, but paid leave. And when they went to pull for a jury for a murder trial, they had 180 people that they went through. They could only get 7 people because out of 180 people, the majority of people had Baltimore police brutality against them or a family member or someone who had perjured themselves.
Yikes.
This is a nonfiction book, meaning that it's based on this reporter's investigation.
Right.
So,
and I think that's where, like when you're a white person who's might be living in these cities, and you'd say, hey, just listen to them, or just, like put your hands up, everything's fine. Like from our perspective, that is. Like, that's what we're, like, police are your friends. Police are there to help. Police, like there is that narrative. And so then we pass that along to other people. Like, if you're not doing anything wrong, then of course these people are going to be for you. And it's like, that's not their experience.
right.
That's not what they've been taught. These people are not for us.
As a people group.
Right.
And that's the breakthrough. Now, mind you, yesterday when I was driving into the studio, I saw the lights on a police car.
Yeah.
With a car pulled over. And I rarely see the bubbles flashing. I mean, literally in a year and a half, I can count 5 times.
Right.
2 of the times, it was in the evening. It was dark. I couldn't see who was driving. Things like that. I don't remember the 3rd time. But 2 other times, as I drive by and I look, the people pulled over are people of color. Yesterday, situation, 2 young men. I don't know what their ethnicity was. I just know that they were people of color. And I thought, of all the Mercedes-Benz, BMWs, and Acuras flying down that street between 7 and 10 over, I just wondered how much was influenced, because when the police officer saw them, they were young people of color. And to your point, and in this series, it's illustrated. When a policeman pulled over, there was nothing that the person did. He actually got the information about when he saw where the person's address was. It profiled that he knew that this person was a working man providing for his family, and he laid off and he let the guy go. But if not, if he had any reason, and these police officers were told, you don't have to have cause. We're clearing the streets. And so with that became this, and I think they start out the series with the Baltimore police were acting like the gangsters in the 1920s and 1930s. Like, I mean, there was no rule of law for them. And if this is offensive to you, I would just ask you the question of why. If you're for justice, then any injustice should be. And we were going to timestamp kind of like a weekend update thing. Right. We have moved from difficult times of the pandemic to more difficult times.
Right.
Around the world. It's not pretty around the world. And man, there's just a lot going on that's weighing on people.
Yeah, and I think that there's the and where white people can get defensive, right? Because we say like we want the police protected too, and I don't want the police to be unprotected.
Oh, yeah. I mean, for the record, me either.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want them to be like I go back. I don't want them to be killed. But there's the side of saying we have to have a conversation, and that's where learning the perspective. Because whether you're a black guy who's on the Chicago PD or wherever PD, like that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the system. And there are people of color that are in our city who are saying we don't think that they're for us based on generations.
Yeah.
Generations and generations have told us like that they're not for us.
Yeah.
And that's where there's like, can we have a conversation where we can understand? Now, are they all law-abiding citizens? Like, not all the time. Was the car that pulled over, did they find something on, like, I don't know, but but we're also looking at it and saying, there are things that, as they're trying to be able to figure out their culture, they're trying to figure out how to provide, and there are things that they come into dead ends with because of who they are as well.
Yeah.
And so how am I going to provide for my family? Well, I've got to lie, cheat, and steal in order to do it.
Yeah.
And they don't see another path. Now that's another conversation to be able to bring in. So why are people committing crimes? Well, usually it's because of resources or the lack thereof.
Yeah.
And so if we can have a conversation and be able to say, like, what's it going to take for us to understand people's perspectives? Let's understand the police perspective. Like, they're sometimes afraid for their own life, and so they are acting out of that.
So I have a really interesting thing that just flipped through my mind.
Yeah.
So in my head, somebody's arguing, well, I mean, we just don't need federal government involvement in this.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'm about states' independence and the states, taking care of this on their own, cities handling, individually and stuff like that. And here's my question. Did you cash the stimulus checks?
Yeah. So addressing that to all people and saying that's a place to start.
Well, here's my question.
Uh-huh.
If you don't want federal government involvement, if you don't think large government, and I'm not an advocate for the federal government to be involved.
Mm-hmm.
But how many people tore up the check or sent the check back?
Right.
Check your integrity about what you think you believe. Because if you're anti dealing with things as a whole, across the whole nation, then how are you responding individually to when it benefits you? I want to live in a safe neighborhood. I want for people. I mean, I'm like the prophet of can't we get all just get along and love each other? I mean, like, what's the problem here?
Right.
But with $6 a gallon gas, have you paid more than $90 for a tank of gas yet?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think it was because sometimes I fill it up in phases. Like I'll do like a half a tank here, and then we'll fill up the rest. And when I did that one, the other, so I filled up a half a tank, and then Heather filled it up the rest of the way. I mean, it would have been equal to about $120.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. For a tank.
Right.
Right.
I know.
Yeah. We're not talking about like multiple tanks or, you know, I mean, it was, yeah, it's crazy.
Well, I knew because I do a lot of the grocery shopping and, you know, make sure the cars are filled up and stuff like that. And I just in passing said to Amy, I'm like, hey, it was $88. Fill up your car. I mean, not like, oh my gosh, it's your, I'd been driving a car for 2 days, you know, and what, but I like it was close to empty.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh my gosh, that's almost like double. I'm like, well, babe, when you go from paying $2.74 to $3.29 a gallon and you're at $6 a gallon,
Yeah.
you know, and if that money's going into the gas tank, I mean, like, again, I move into, you know, what about people with fixed incomes?
Right. Well, I mean, I just was talking to Heather about this because our gas bill has tripled. Our electricity bill has almost quadrupled
Wow.
in like a year.
Wow.
I mean, and so we're not just looking at, I mean, the gas prices are absurd. What we know is that eventually those gas prices are going to come down.
Maybe.
I'm fairly confident that someday, and I'm not even saying in the near future because I
Right.
don't think it's going to happen in the near future.
Yeah.
But I think eventually we're going to get gas prices under control again. But we're looking at an increase across the board in like what I'm like. I know that pandemic we cooked more.
Yeah.
And we've now just continued that trend. So of course I'm like, okay, gas is going to go up because we're using it more.
Yeah.
Electricity, like in the summertime, we have air conditionings rolling.
Yeah.
I get it, but we haven't even had air conditioners on, and it's almost quadrupled.
Wow.
Like we have a gas water heater, so that's not even like
Right.
so it's that's our system for heat in here is radiators.
And
so we're looking at that's even gas generated.
And Caitlin is not in her bedroom playing electric guitar, draining all of the wattage through this
Right.
massive guitar unit. I thought you'd love that, Caitlin.
So when we're looking at this, this is like more of a compiling of, which I mean is where they're talking about inflation, and the inflation is increasing at a higher rate, and so this is the situation that we're not just dealing with high gas prices. We're also dealing with a complete rise of natural gas, a complete rise of electricity. I mean, like all of these numbers are continuing to like almost, I mean, I'd say skyrocket, but
Yeah, and you know what's crazy is when you use those kind of numbers and they talk about an 8% inflation, you're like 8%.
you're right.
I mean, like,
where's that
I
happening?
get that you have a national way to figure out. It's like it cracks me up when NPR is like, and the national average finally just went over $5 a gallon.
I know, you're like, whoa.
And I'm like, yeah, like 3 weeks ago, dude. You know, they really should be reporting. I mean, like a national average versus, you know, zones and stuff like that. But again, there are people who are saying, yeah, this is crazy. And so they're moving because they have the ability to.
Right.
There are people who are stuck where they're at
Because they don't have the ability.
and they don't have the ability. They don't have the ability financially. They don't have the ability. There's not an advocacy for them to be able to get out of the hole they're in. And so that is why, if you find yourself in your shoes and you're not facing any of this, that is why recognizing a privileged life is not an insult. It's not something that you have to hang your head about. This is just a conversation to call you to awareness. Like, what do I do with that? I'm like, sit with it.
Mm-hmm.
Be aware.
Yeah, and it's something that we've highlighted constantly, but it's sometimes what
I feel like in season 6 we didn't really even touch on it.
right. But I well,
you know what I'm saying? Like I
think that we did touch on the like sometimes we need to listen more than we speak.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and in this sometimes is a conversation on listening because like high gas prices, like it does affect our, my family budget. Like we're looking at it and saying, yeah, like we need to drive less and, whatever else, we've got to cut out. But we're not saying like I've got to decide whether or not we're going to eat or drive.
Right.
Like I don't have to make that decision. So sometimes what it's saying, like I need to try to listen to some other people as well.
Well, and it raises my awareness because quite frankly, yesterday going home, like I have to be aware when I drive because the amount of bicycles that are out this year, because of the gas prices, people are like, I'm not going to drive.
I'm not driving, yeah.
I mean, literally for me, I mean, this is just one thing. If I get in the car at 7 a.m. to come to the studio, commutes 35 to 40 minutes. If I come in at 7:30, 45 to 50 minutes. If I leave at 7:45, 45 to 50 minutes. If I leave at 8:05, 25-minute commute. Well, what is that? It's the amount of time my car's running is cut in half.
Right.
Like these are the things when you're like, Steve, how does your head work and your mind of reminisce? I mean, like these are things that like I just click off and I'm not really Rain Man. I'm not that smart.
Yes, but I mean, even in that place, so you're either like, I've got to get up at 5:00 in the morning in order to travel before I hit that, or am I just going to wait until 8:30 until I can actually get on the road and not have to idle for 40 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. And I think those are decisions we didn't always have to take into account, and now it's like, no, we we need to learn.
Well, and it's just management. I mean, that like in my head, I want to be able to be down here and get a good 10-hour day in. On the flip side, it doesn't mean that my responsibilities at home have changed. I make messes and I need to clean them up. So if I got
circling back around.
If I got an extra hour, why don't I just take an hour to clean up? Some other thing. People are like, this is crazy.
And it's true.
It is true. And you got to be nimble. Right. You know how hard it is going into season 3 and then you have to be nimble? I was like, actually what I figured out about
season 3, I'm not supposed to be. It's supposed to be stuck in my old ways.
Yeah, grumpy old man, But what I really realized was I was not as nimble as I thought I was in my second season of life. What I was imposing my nimbleness on everyone else conforming to what I wanted to do. I'm like, hey, we're going to wing it. Follow me. Here we go. Right. Like, is that freedom? Not for anyone else. They're all trapped, So I'm just like the willow with the breeze blowing through the branches. I need to be able to sway and to move with the beauty of the wind and be nimble.
Yeah.
Jack be nimble, Jack be quick. I don't know, if I don't figure it out, I'm going to get hit with a stick. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. So to me, I think whether we're dealing with the racial things and continuing to say, let's learn through a season. Let's learn through when there's a national, day like Juneteenth. Let's learn about it if we don't know. Instead of being able to just criticize, well, they got their own month and now they're going to get their, no, that's just a bad way to look at it. Let's learn instead of criticize.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing on the other side when we're looking at, as you brought up that the show, Like there's two sides. Let's learn from the side that we don't know about.
And actually, in that show, I would say from you got people color, you got the police, you got the politicians, and then you have the reformers. I'd say 4 different perspectives going on that are really. Oh, and the Puritans, like the good cops that want to make a difference and that are doing their jobs. Like so, 5 different perspectives, and probably multiple more.
Yeah.
But I agree. Hey, and while we were talking, you know what my celebration of Juneteenth is going to be? I am going to take some ginger ale and also some sparkling water, and I'm going to do raspberry, strawberry, mint, and make the idea of drinking strawberry soda
Yeah.
makes my stomach curl.
Me too. I don't.
So sweet, red dye, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm going to make a refreshing drink, and
I have mint out back if you want to take some. Just needs to be washed.
Oh,
just
nice.
like any other.
yeah. So, I mean, like, I think I'm going to, of all the glasses I will lift up on Father's Day,
Yeah.
I'm going to lift up that glass in celebration of Juneteenth.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think again, what we want to try to be able to also challenge and be able to put that out is listen, and again listen to the perspectives that are being shared, and try not to jump into the extreme. Like you're just like, well, I'm gonna be all this or all this, because again, that never leads to really anything productive.
Well, and take on the role of a detective. Be Sherlock Holmes in all of this. It seems to me we didn't even get into gun control and all.
I think we'll have to save that one because we're already
But,
at the.
I mean, like, if your skin crawls when you can't impose on someone else what you believe, it's a call to reel it back and start being a detective. Gather information. This is not the day of reformation. It's the day of transformation by the renewing of your mind. For those who get it, you know where to find it.
When you know, you know.
All right. Well, hey, great conversation. Good to be back at season 6.
Episode number 1. Take care, everybody.